Welcome to the Essential Partners 35th Anniversary Gala. I'm Molly Zucker.
And I'm Derwin Clark.
Derwinty and I have the privilege of serving as your MCs for this evening's celebration.
We are also members of the board of directors here at Essential Partners.
As members of the board, we are incredibly proud of this organization, its mission, the people involved, and the impact we have together.
In a time where the world is so fractured, where people are disconnected and isolated, Essential Partners serves the people who work to repair their communities.
It reminds me of the Japanese art of kintsugi.
Oh yeah, say more about that, Molly.
Well, in kintsugi, you take an important, well-loved, but fractured object, and you mend its cracks and chips with gold. Through this art of repair, things are not only mended and functional again, they're also stronger and more beautiful.
I love that. The work we do at Essential Partners is backed by decades of research, but it is still as much art as science. That's sort of what sets us apart from many of our peers.
There's so much heart in the work that EP's practitioners do. They help solve problems and navigate challenges, sure, but they also repair relationships. They make sure people are being heard and seen. They embrace all the messiness and humanity that makes each community uniquely what it is.
In other words, Essential Partners is in the business of making things less terrible. Truly, no one is luckier than we are. It's a gift to serve and support this work.
Something we've learned in our time with Essential Partners is that there are thousands upon thousands of people all across the United States who want to be in on the fixing and mending side of history. This isn't an organization, it's a movement.
And there are millions more who want to participate. They want to be part of something local where they can care for one another, strengthen their communities, revitalize democracy from the ground up.
It's something I find wildly hopeful about the mission of Essential Partners. Tonight, you'll hear a lot about hope, about possibility, about a better way of being together.
With that in mind, we welcome you to tonight's event in celebration of 35 years of bridging and community building. We welcome our practitioners, facilitators, our community of practice members, our friends, and supporters. I want to offer my sincerest gratitude to all that have made a donation in honor of tonight's event, especially our 35th anniversary sponsors. From the bottom of our hearts, we thank you for your incredible generosity.
Your support tonight is a powerful affirmation of our work towards building a cultural movement of dialogue and fostering strong, connected communities. Together, we're making a lasting impact.
We are so fortunate to be joined tonight by Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist Charles Duhigg, whose best-selling book, Super Communicators, is full of people who give us hope.
We'll also be presenting 3 inspirational leaders with 2024 Founders Awards for their commitment to the cause of connection in this fractured world.
But first, we'd like to introduce Essential Partners co-executive directors, Katie Heighton and John Saruf, to say a few words.
Thank you, Derwinty and Molly. I'm Katie Heighton.
And I'm John Saruf.
We are so grateful to have you here virtually with us to celebrate this organization's 35th anniversary.
As you know, Essential Partners was founded by a visionary group of behavioral health researchers and practitioners. Through years of experimentation and refinement, they developed our evidence-based approach, reflective structured dialogue.
You may have experienced our approach from a small group dialogue about a polarizing political topic, like the role of guns in American life, or about a divisive election.
If you have, you experience the most powerful version of reflective structured dialogue. It's an intervention to interrupt the most entrenched dysfunctions, for members of a community to find a way past them together.
Our approach is more than a way of leading groups through those difficult dialogues, though. It is an interlocking set of tools, skills, and frameworks that have the power to transform patterns of communication and relationships anywhere people live, work, and learn together.
Our mission at Essential Partners is to help people build relationships across differences, to address their community's most pressing challenges, both the existential and the everyday kinds.
We don't just drop in, lead one dialogue about an issue and disappear. because we know that doesn't work. Because what happens when the next big issue threatens to divide people? Single events just don't change things in the long term.
The most urgent problems can only be addressed by people who live and work together every day. That's why we equip local stakeholders with our approach. We provide the expertise, the training, and support. They create change, and they create change that lasts.
Most often, we partner with institutions at the cornerstones of community life: libraries, schools, employers, and congregations. These are the places where people learn and practice how to navigate different values, perspectives, and identities. They're places where futures and lives are already intertwined. So dialogue is not a hypothetical exercise, but a deeply important practice.
By partnering with multiple cornerstones in a single community, we catalyze a community-wide shift in the norms and the expectations. The teachers and students and parents at a school, the employees and managers in a company, and civic leaders all practice and model the same set of skills.
Gradually, then, people across that community discover that healthy, open dialogue, driven by curiosity and grounded in a common humanity, has become the norm. It becomes the way people expect important conversations to happen.
Let's hear from members of one community where we've been able to build a local movement. For 35 years, Essential Partners has helped people build relationships across differences to address their community's most pressing challenges. Essential Partners has supported communities in all 50 states and around the globe. Communities like the Raleigh-Durham Chapel Hill area of North Carolina. And I want to introduce you to some of our partners from that region. Can you talk a little bit about divisions and conflicts that you see in this community that are part of what makes life difficult to navigate?
So few people listen to what other people have to say. You know, we're so divided, partisan-wise. People think the other side is, so evil. It's because they're hearing all this misinformation.
I had a dialogue just yesterday, actually, with the sophomores talking about the election.
How are we thinking about policing, and how are we thinking about people within those communities?
The things like racism, classism, sexism.
Because I am part of the LGBTQ community, I really wanted to create a safe place where people can talk about their identity, where they think they belong in a community.
The overall level of polarization, I think, in our society is showing up in workplaces. People are really having a hard time even listening to someone who has a different opinion.
What do you do to try to get people to get to the place where they're willing to do this?
My hope would be that we could use these tools to really just help people talk and listen. Not even necessarily to change minds, change opinions, but really just to truly listen to each other and truly hear each other.
For me, it's listening, taking self out of the way and actually listening. The connections that we help create through the questions that we ask and the stories. We can tell those stories and make connections with other people and find the similarities. The differences are not so hard when you find those similarities and then you connect with someone.
One of the biggest tools that I've learned in my time working with Essential Partners is about what is like bubbling beneath the surface, and how do we get at the question that is in that space. Right. One of the things we're dealing with is growth. There's good growth and equitable growth, and there is growth that really leaves folks out. And at worst, that happens with gentrification. At best, we have affordable housing. And so that's one of the big issues to me that feels like it has tendrils and all the other things that would rise to the surface for us.
Sometimes when we come into conversation with people, if we go to a meeting or if we do a thing, we don't often know what the real purpose of the conversation or interaction is. We want to be understanding each other or leaning into understanding each other instead of convincing each other.
It's a really unique platform to actually talk about the election without getting like political, honestly. And without saying, I am a Democrat, I'm a Republican, they still managed to get across to like a common ground and find out where they agreed and disagreed.
As we've gotten better at it, and it's become more widespread on our campus, people are seeing it for what it is, which is just this great tool to connect people, to build community. We have these kids, in the work that they're doing, have for sure shifted the culture of this school.
I think these dialogues are also so important because they give us the chance where it's like, I'm not talking as a Democrat, I'm not talking as a Republican, I'm not a conservative, I'm not a liberal. You know, I'm just a human person with my own experiences and views.
The ability to be able to break all those barriers down and to just have a normal conversation where you're just sharing perspectives and ideas with each other. I feel like that is the best way to resolve these issues and that conflict.
What's possible?
What's not possible? We have students, we have universities, we have clergymen, we have lawyers, community members. Can you imagine if all of those people got together and started having dialogues, what the world could look like? The sky's the limit. We will change the way that people have conversations.
Those were just a handful of stories from a single region.
Over the past 5 years alone, Essential Partners has equipped more than 14,000 local changemakers across 42 states, Washington, D.C., Puerto Rico, Canada, Mexico, and beyond.
The deep commitment of these people means the impact of an Essential Partners engagement lasts not weeks nor months, but years after the collaboration has ended. These dedicated bridge builders embody our mission and inspire us every day.
If you feel as inspired as we do by these stories of transformation, I hope you'll consider making a donation to support our mission at whatever level feels meaningful to you. Please visit our donation page at whatisessential.org/donate. Or you can use your phone to scan the QR code above, or text EP35 to 44321. Individual donations allow us to provide our free resources and guides and allow us to offer free consultation and coaching to thousands of individuals in need.
Your donation advances the vision and legacy of our founders, Laura and Dick Chasen, Corey Becker, Sally Ann Roth, and Maggie Herzig, a group of behavioral health experts who adapted their wisdom and insight to improve public discourse, interrupt dysfunctional dynamics, and strengthen community bonds.
Through their innovation and research, they developed the powerful framework that remains the core of our work today, reflective structured dialogue. Flexible, adaptable, and effective, reflective structured dialogue has been used around the globe to help people live, work, worship, and learn better together.
We honor their legacy tonight through our Founders Awards, recognizing those who embodied the courageous and visionary spirit of our founders. The 3 exceptional leaders being celebrated tonight have all demonstrated a remarkable dedication to creating a world of thriving communities, strengthened by difference, connected by trust.
We'll now turn it over to Bob Staines, a longtime associate and dedicated friend to EP, who will introduce our first Founders Award recipient.
Hello, I'm Bob Staines, Senior Associate at Essential Partners. In my 3 decades with the organization, I've known few leaders as dedicated and visionary as Janelle Nelson. In her role as Mission Director of YMCA Pierce and Kitsap counties in Washington State, Janelle has leveraged the power of reflective structured dialogue to address some of the most polarizing issues in her community. She has worked tirelessly to make her YMCA a place of deep and expansive belonging, and to help every person in the community there feel heard. In addition, Janelle has played a key role in the national YMCA's discernment around its Christian identity, using a dialogic approach to existential questions like, what does the C in YMCA mean in a modern context? What is different about that identity for different locations across the country? Who does it draw into their community, and who might it exclude? She has gifted us with an invitation into these conversations as a thought partner, which led to a larger collaboration with the National YMCA. With a $224,000 grant from the AAA ICDR Foundation, EP and the YMCA this year launched an initiative to build local capacity for transformative dialogue practices by partnering with select local YMCA networks, beginning with Janelle's own YMCA of Pierce and Kitsap counties in Washington. We're proud to honor Janelle tonight for her vision, her leadership, her courage, and her unyielding commitment to a future of thriving communities strengthened by difference, connected by trust. Hey, Janelle.
Hello, Bob. That was quite an introduction. Thank you for all those kind words. I'm very honored to receive this. In fact, I just got the reward in the mail. Pretty amazing. And, you know, it says honoring leaders who strengthen relationships, deepen belonging, and renew hope in their communities. The initiative that we started 2.5 years ago with Essential Partners' assistance and expertise, which I would never have launched without it, believe me, has the name Hope in it. It's called Bridge of Hope. And we envisioned that because the YMCA is this place of convening people from all over in every demographic that you can imagine in a community. So we just feel responsible with our opportunity to really bring people together in an organization that already is trusted and a convener of all people. So I'm just honored to even be in the work. And when I found EP, I don't even remember how, which is really bothers me, but it was years ago. And I looked inside of, you know, your website and your philosophy, and I just thought, oh my gosh, they have something golden that we need to implement and use in our community. And yes, it's gone national. YMCA is very committed to bridging and belonging. It's in our DNA. And we have, you know, just tried in the last years to really examine ourselves and figure out what can we do and what should, you know, what response do we make in these times of toxic polarization. So this is very exciting work for us. And I just am super honored to be a recipient. I've never had an award like this before. So it's pretty cool.
Well, thanks again, Janelle. And it's really great to hear about the larger work of the Y. And, you know, we're also curious about you and your calling and your journey. And I wonder how the work that you're doing with Dialogue with the Y kind of reflects your calling and also embodies it at the same time.
That's a great question. And I have deep answers, lots to say, but I would just summarize it that I feel called to be a person that repairs the world, a person that brings people to their full potential, whether it's an individual or a family or a community at large. Like, we have so much within us that is so good in each person that we got to help people find that again. You know, I think people do have a curious muscle in them about other people and that they do want to love other people. And we just need to give them opportunity to experience it. We need to give them opportunity to believe in themselves and to find their muscle of not just civility, but actually love. And I believe there's enough of it. You just have to keep mining for it and helping people exercise their ability to love others.
Thanks again, Janelle. And now we'll turn it over to our MCs for the evening.
Thank you, Bob.
Thank you, Bob and Janelle. We are excited to follow this growing partnership with the YMCA.
Before we hear from our next Founders Award recipient, we are thrilled to welcome Pulitzer Prize-winning investigative journalist, Charles Duhigg.
In his new book, Super Communicators: How to Unlock the Secret Power of Connection, Duhigg asks why connection matters so much. explores the many unexpected ways connection and communication affect our lives, and digs into real-world stories about the most effective tools to build connections, including a chapter about essential partners.
Communication is a superpower, Duhigg writes. We couldn't agree more. Please join me in welcoming Charles Duhigg in conversation with co-executive director John Saruf.
Charles, thank you so much for being here to talk about your book, Super Communicators. We haven't spoken, I don't think, since the book came out. We spoke a lot in advance, but it's just exciting to have you here. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you. Thank you for having me. And congratulations to Essential Partners and to you. 35 years is a massive accomplishment. And hopefully the nation shows that it's better for it.
We hope so. Thank you. And your book, I mean, this moment, I'd love to know, you write about it in the book, but what drew you to this? And almost more importantly, why did we need this book now?
Yeah, I think probably many of the same things that led to the creation of Essential Partners so long ago, right? That as a reporter, I was previously a reporter at the New York Times. I'm now at the New Yorker magazine. And one of the things that struck me were these two lessons. The first is that our nation in many ways is fantastic at having difficult conversations, right? I think about the Constitutional Convention when these people came together who basically hated each other, and they fought for month after month after month and managed to write a constitution together. And the periods that I think we're most proud of are not when we all agree with each other, but when we come together despite our disagreements and find a way to move forward. And I felt like over the last decade that we had forgotten some of the principles of how to do that, right? That much of the work that I'm sure you see every single day was having less of a spread, less of an embrace, less of a part of our conversation than I thought it should be. And particularly as a journalist, I think we play a very similar role to the role that you and Essential Partners plays in trying to cultivate and craft conversations that help us become our best selves. And so that's why I wrote the book.
Oh, I love that. It struck me the idea of crafting or of creating an environment for it. Very early on in the book, you're talking to Jim Lawler, the CIA agent, who is being interviewed by some researchers about, how he's become such an incredible communicator. And they don't get it. They still don't get it. And one of them asks, I don't understand really what it's about. And he asks a question about her divorce, right? And she starts to answer him. And then he stops her and says, well, I don't really need the answer, but what I want to express is that there is something we've created here, an environment for communication that invited you to want to share in that way. And that's so aligned with our work, this sort of creating an environment that invites people into a different kind of conversation. I'd love to hear more about that idea.
No, I love that. I love that. And I think you're exactly right. And it's interesting. One of the big things from the last decade, and I'm sure you're familiar with this, is neuroscientists have been able to see what happens inside our brains when we have a meaningful conversation, when we really understand someone and they understand us. And what they found is that our bodies and brains start to match each other, right? Without us realizing it, our heart rates become similar. Our breath patterns become similar. The dilation of our pupils become similar. And more importantly, the neural activity within our brains starts to look more and more alike. We start to think alike, which actually makes sense when you think about it. Because if I tell you about something I'm feeling, you kind of feel it a little bit.
Right.
But it turns out that this neural entrainment, this simultaneity in thinking, this is at the core of communication. This is that moment that you mentioned when I feel like I can trust you, I can be open with you. And what we've discovered is that because communication is so important to Homo sapiens, to how we evolved, our brain loves this entrainment. Our brain craves this entrainment. That's why we feel so good after a good conversation, even if it's a conversation with someone we disagree with, but we feel listened to and we feel like we actually heard them. We feel amazing afterwards. And I think the more that we teach people to crave and seek that response, and the more we create the environments as you do and your work does to make that kind of entrainment easier, the more we're genuinely making people happier, and I think making the world a happier place.
I love that. And it reminds me a little bit of some of the conversations we have when people who are quite discouraged about the state of the world think about how divided we are, how fearful we may be of each other, and how many forces there are in dynamics. I mean, we don't think necessarily about sort of evil forces in the world, but dynamics that will split a community and sort of drive people into enemy camps of sorts, and how those are hard to disrupt. But part of disrupting that is by energizing this desire that you're talking about to connect, right? That's a sort of a deep desire that we have. I'd love to hear more
Well,
about
can I
it.
ask you a question on that? When you find folks who are entrenched in polarization, they come from warring factions, they come from political parties that have built their identity in part in opposition to the other, what do you find is the first step to unlock, at least imagining a different possibility?
Right. And I love the fact that you said that part of their identity is actually built on being an enemy of the other. That's sort of one of those places of division that you sort of recognize that that's something that needs to shift. But it actually goes right back to what you write about in your book. It's about somebody deeply being listened to. We have an exercise that we've developed called listening for trust and understanding. And when a person can't get to the place where they could even walk into the room with somebody from the other side or from the other sides, we as facilitators act somewhat like a surrogate. Like, okay, I'll get into the room with you. I'm going to ask you questions. I'm going to listen to you deeply. And I'm going to ask you to tell your story. I'm going to reflect it back, all the things that you wrote about in the book. And over time, the act of being listened to, the act of telling your story, the act of imagining what they might be curious about, is one of the questions we ask. Well, if you could ask a question of the other side and they were to answer it honestly, what would you want to know? What do you wish they would ask you? Right? These are sets of questions. And we are like sort of surrogate conversationalists. At the end of that exercise, almost universally, people say to me, can we do this with the other side? Can you set this up? And I say, well, I thought I heard you say that you didn't think it was valuable, you didn't want to. Well, if this is what it's going to be like, that's different, right?
Yeah.
And
I think that gets to a huge part of this, right? That particularly now, the anticipatory anxiety of a charged conversation can really ward us off. And Nick Eppley, who's a professor at the University of Chicago, he's written a lot about how our expectations for how a conversation will go are completely different from what our lived experience of that conversation is. We always assume it's going to be more awkward than it actually is. We're going to assume that if we disagree with someone, we're going to like them less than we end up liking them. We assume that we're going to have less of a good time, but of course, after a good conversation, everyone feels like, oh, I'm so glad I had that conversation. And I think that part of what I love about the exercise you mentioned and when we spoke and I learned about your work and the work you guys are doing is that it focuses on process. And I think oftentimes it's really easy for us to get into this mindset where we say, okay, I'm going to have this hard conversation. Here's what I want to say. Here's the content that I want to get across. But of course, you guys know, and you help others learn, that if I get the process right, oftentimes that content sort of flows out easily on its own.
Right.
But when I'm not focused on the process, when I'm not focused on proving to you that I'm listening, proving to you that I want to understand, trying to show you that I'm actually thinking about what you said, when I don't focus on that process, that's when suddenly you get these competing monologues. And it's no wonder that people walk away from this frustrated.
Right. I love this idea of sort of the expectation being worse than the reality. And one of the things we emphasize in our work is the preparation. And I often say people are preparing for a conversation whether you work with them or not. They're preparing all of their arguments, they're preparing their quick comebacks, they're preparing to be defensive. And our work is to actually help them prepare, for curiosity, prepare for deep listening, prepare for the conversation that they want to have. And you actually write this about them in the book about people writing their purpose before a conversation. Share about that.
Yeah. This is a great study. It's actually unpublished. These two researchers, they went into this. Essentially, it's like an investment bank, and it's exactly what you think. Like the most competitive place on earth, right? There's all these people who they're fighting for deals with each other. They're fighting for their bonuses with each other. It's always a zero-sum game, and fights would happen all the time in this place. Like not just arguments, like literal fist fights, people pushing each other, right? It was just a very, very aggressive environment. And so much so that it was damaging the company really significantly. And so these researchers came in and they said, okay, we want to do an experiment. We're going to ask people to do two things. Before a meeting, write down what your goal is, like what you hope to accomplish in this meeting, and then write down what you think the other person's goal is in this meeting.
Yeah.
So they did this. It takes like 10 or 15 seconds, right? But for a whole week, everyone would take out a little piece of paper, write these down. Then they would usually shove it into their pocket and they would never mention it. They wouldn't share with others what it was. But the incidence of conflict went down by something like 70%.
Incredible.
And I think the reason why is because, when we're having a discussion, we have different kinds of conversations. We're having a practical conversation and a social conversation and an emotional conversation. And when we get tripped up is when we think we're discussing something practically, but we're responding emotionally. Or when this person is sharing their feelings with me and I'm treating it like a problem to be solved rather than something to empathize with. And I think when we sit down and we identify what our goals are and what others' goals are, it just forces us to pay a little bit more attention and to say, Jim is complaining. I know that Jim wants to get a budget and I want to get a budget out of this meeting. He's really upset right now. I think it's not because he disagrees with me on the budget. He's worried that we'll have to lay people off.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. He's in a little bit of an emotional mindset and we should have that conversation. We should have that emotional conversation. We should match each other. And I think it just makes all the difference just to think a little bit more about what's happening in a conversation.
That's great. You wrote a whole chapter about Essential Partners' work on the gun dialogues, and I have been in a little bit of touch with some of the people that were part of that, but it was great to hear some of the story that I'd never heard before. I'm just wondering sort of what your big takeaway was from your research about the work we had done around the conversations on guns.
Yeah, it was interesting. So everyone I spoke to who participated in the event in Washington, D.C., the one that you guys came in and ran, they all reflected this sort of sense of wonder, again, because their expectations were so different from what their experience was, that they had come in. And for folks who don't know, what happened is that there was a group of gun rights advocates who were brought together, people who support the Second Amendment, and a group of people who were gun control activists, people who had in some cases had experienced school shootings themselves. And everyone was invited to this. They all agreed to show up. And everyone I talked to said, I figured I was either going to have the worst time of my life, or it was just going to be a whole weekend of fighting, or, if nothing else, I'd be able to practice some of my attacks and get them ready for when we're on TV together or, out in the streets. And instead they came and they had the experience that you and your colleagues crafted. And the experience very much focused on talking about people's own experiences, talking about why they felt a certain way about guns rather than trying to trade statistics and facts. And as a result, everyone walked away telling me that they felt so much closer to someone on the other side of this issue. Now, what they didn't say is I changed my mind. And that's okay, right? Because that wasn't the goal. The goal was not to convince anyone that the other side is right. The goal is to see if you can have a conversation, a dialogue where you both walk away richer and smarter for the exchange.
Yeah.
And people just loved it. Now, as you know, what's interesting is, and I don't think you guys were as involved in this part of it, after the experience in Washington, D.C., people went home, and the organizers of the overall project set up a private Facebook group for people to continue the conversation. And they invited new people in who hadn't gotten the training you guys had provided. And everything like fell apart within minutes. Like within 40 minutes, people were calling each other jackbooted Nazis online. And what that suggests to me, and they ended up doing a good job of teaching those same techniques that you guys had taught in person, of changing the tone of the conversation. But what it really drove home for me is the skills that Essential Partners taught those folks, the skills that are at the core of the book and that are so important for all of us. They are fungible skills. They are skills that we can take into different environments, into different types of communication, into different settings. But we have to think about, what is the skill itself, right? What is the thing that I'm doing? Instead of relying on my intuition, saying, okay, if I'm online, how does that change how I have to prove to someone that I'm listening to them?
Right.
But it makes all the difference once we do.
Yeah. No, that's lovely. There's a moment in the chapter when you talk about a sort of back channeling that two people do, very different sides of the gun dialogue. Because one had noticed that the other one was sort of getting shot down, but I want to share that because I have a thought about it. I want you to share.
Oh yeah, no, I'd love to. Yeah, so this is once they were online, a woman named Melanie Jeffcoat, who had actually been had experienced a school shooting herself when she was in high school, and wasn't injured, but fought very hard for gun control.
I mean,
she
back
was
in
trying
the
to
80s,
make
right? She was
back in the 80s, yeah,
right?
like back
we
before
even had a sense, yeah.
Right, back before this was like a topic of conversation. And she was trying to make arguments online, and she kept on getting just mercilessly attacked by the pro-gun folks. And so this guy, John Godfrey, who's a former like police officer, like he's someone, and he told me he owns 4 dozen guns. Like he actually said he didn't know because he hasn't counted lately, but he has a lot of guns, right? He's like guns. And he messaged her directly, and he said, look, tomorrow when you go on, why don't you ask a question and I will respond right away in this really curious manner, saying like, thank you for bringing this up. I'd love to hear your thoughts on it. Here's my perspectives. And let's try and do that back and forth, right? We'll make it look organic. We'll make it look natural, but actually we're planning this. And it worked. It totally changed the conversation that day.
Yeah.
And they realized that oftentimes all it takes is 2 people willing to say, I'm going to model for everyone else what behavior's needed.
Yeah.
And it changes the entire tenor of the discussion.
Yeah. No, I love that. I love that for 2 reasons. Exactly what you said. Sometimes it just takes somebody to model it. And we talk a lot about the dynamics that once they get going, they're self-sustaining. And we are in our work often trying to disrupt, right, that self-perpetuating escalatory cycle. And people can do it themselves. They don't need us to come in and do it. Once they've learned it, they've embodied it, as you said, they've sort of made it explicit. It's not just instincts. It's actually skills and techniques that they've learned. They can disrupt an escalating pattern, and they can do it in any conversation anywhere. And the courage or the willingness or the relationship and trust that those 2 particular people had built up, that one of them stood up for the other and said, nah, we're going to do this differently in this conversation. I think that is one of the things that I'm really looking for, seeing as possibilities of communities, that when the sort of the big divide comes to their community, that there are enough relationships built in that city or town that say, no, we're not going to go to, into fighting and demonizing, dehumanizing.
I think that we're seeing that. I think that we're seeing that so much in how different people are talking right now, right? That, I have 2 kids, and I'm sure folks watching have kids themselves. And in school, they learn this lesson: don't be a bystander, be an upstander, right? Insert yourself into a situation to make it better. And it's kind of like a cute thing to tell kids, but I think about it myself all the time. There are people around me who voted for someone who I didn't vote for, who I don't like at all. And when they make their opinions known, it is easy to say, you are foolish. You don't know what you're talking about. You're supporting something that I think is actually unethical. But I think a better response is to try and be that upstander and to say, look, I disagree with you. And I know these folks over here, they're being a little mean. I want to show you how much I want to understand. I want to set a model. I want to be the bigger person. And a nation full of bigger people, and this is aspirational, this is optimistic, but it has happened before. We have been nations of bigger people. And I think when we do that with the skills that Essential Partners teaches, with the type of training and the reminders that you've spent your life on, it really does pay off. It's not like spitting into the wind or whistling into the wind, one of those things. It's something you can change the direction of the ocean with these small little shifts.
I can't think of a better way to end a conversation, and a conversation that I wish could continue. Charles, thank you so much for taking the time. Thank you for writing this important book and getting some of these ideas into the world. I can't tell you how many people have emailed me and because they learned about this work through your book. It's really important that voices like yours that have been listening to the country and to the conversation for so long are highlighting the importance of it and the possibility of it. So thank you so much.
My pleasure. And thank you and congratulations again.
Thank you.
Thank you, John and Charles, for that fascinating conversation. If you're interested in reading Charles Duhigg's Super Communicators and supporting the Essential Partners mission, you are in luck. Every supporter who donates $250 or more tonight will have the opportunity to receive a free copy of the book.
Next, I'm thrilled to introduce Winnie Rungamba, EP Associate and Community of Practice Liaison. Winnie supports our trained community members, offering coaching, programs, and guidance as they use dialogue to transform their communities. Tonight, Winnie will introduce our second Extraordinary Founders Award recipient.
As the liaison to our community of practice, I have had the incredible privilege to get to know our first 2024 Founders Award recipient, Beverly Braxton. Beverly is a true champion of community engagement. As the visionary founder of We the People, Warwick, New York, established in 2021, Beverly has ignited a powerful movement in her community. A former educator and skilled mediator, Beverly possesses a unique ability to foster meaningful dialogue and bridge divides. Through her unwavering dedication, she has spearheaded critical conversations in Warwick, New York, addressing both local and national issues. Her passion for creating inclusive and equitable community gatherings is evident in every endeavor. Beverly's recent participation in our peer learning webinar showcased her expertise in community building and community engagement. She generously shared invaluable insights and practical tools for effective dialogue and how to engage community members in difficult conversations. Additionally, her presence on a panel at the Alliance for Peacebuilding conference highlighted her significant contributions to the field of peacebuilding. Beverly's tireless work and commitment to social justice have made a profound impact on the Warwick community and beyond. Her leadership, compassion, and unwavering dedication to fostering understanding and empathy is an inspiration to us all. Essential Partners is proud to honor Beverly and support her legacy among our Founders Award recipients. Welcome, Beverly Braxton.
Thank you so much, Winnie, for that wonderful introduction of my work. And as I was reflecting on it, I was thinking about all the wonderful support I've gotten from Essential Partners. You know, the first time I actually contacted Family Central, I Googled difficult conversations, and I got a nut and bolts guide from Essential Partners, and it has really been the saving grace for me through this work that I'm doing. And I'm eternally grateful for all the support that Essential Partners has given me. So thank you.
Beverly, we're so inspired by your brilliance, dedication, and heart. Thank you for joining us tonight.
We're so grateful for this chance to honor those doing this work today and the legacy of our founders. Tonight, we also want to recognize one individual who embraced our mission as both a gifted practitioner and an organizational leader at EP, advancing the scope of our work around the globe. To do that, I'd like to welcome EP Associate Fawebe Sinclair.
3 years ago, our friend and colleague, Dave Joseph, passed away with his wife, Andrea, by his side. A leader in the field of peace building, mediation, and dialogue for more than 30 years, Dave joined Essential Partners in 1996 when it was still known as the Public Conversations Project. He also served as a trusted partner of Mediators Beyond Borders International for many years. During his influential tenure here, Dave changed countless lives and made healing possible in thousands of communities around the globe. In his life and work, Dave embodied the teaching of his faith to pursue Tikkun Olam, to repair the world. Nowhere was his impact felt more deeply, though, than in his role as mentor and teacher to generations of practitioners and EP associates. We reached out to those practitioners and invited them to offer reflections about Dave's influence. Here's a sampling of what they shared. Dave embodied global compassion and hope. To have Dave believe in you as a practitioner was like being gifted wisdom and depth beyond what one has yet earned, much less developed. Dave created the conditions for me to more fully develop who I have become as an EP facilitator and trainer of the RSD approach. His trust in me deepened my trust in myself to do this work. Dave was my first mentor. He inspired me and others to talk about the elephant in the room and to tackle those prickly, unpleasant conversations. Dave walked the talk and modeled leading with humility and vulnerability. He modeled how to stay curious in the face of resistance. With integrity and curiosity, Dave lived the craft of dialogue personally as well as professionally. As is evident from these testimonials, Dave possessed a vision, passion, and generosity that could open the door to this work, both at Essential Partners and beyond. To sustain and build upon that legacy, we are very happy to announce the dedication of the Dave Joseph Incubator. The Dave Joseph Incubator will be designed to develop future generations of bridge builders and peacemakers. We will do our best to entrust them with his passion, commitment, and wisdom, just as he did for so many. May Dave's memory be a blessing.
Thank you, Fawebe, and all our associates for sharing your memories with us tonight.
And now, to present the final Founders Award recipient this evening, I would like to welcome back Co-Executive Director Katie Hyten.
Philanthropy plays an enormous role in championing the work of bridge building and depolarization around the United States and the globe. At Essential Partners, philanthropic support has funded research-based innovations in our approach and unlocked the potential of our communities to find the solutions to their biggest problems. 2024 Founders Award recipient Brandon S. Polk has worked tirelessly within philanthropy and in his own practice to build a movement that commits to long-term investments in bridge building and culture change. Before these became the stuff of newspaper headlines, Brandon saw the need to invest in community belonging and connection across differences, and saw how this work, our work, can help communities address many of their most entrenched and intractable problems. Not content to simply advocate successfully for investments in bridge building and dialogue, Brandon has himself bridged ideological divides within philanthropy, having held roles at the Charles Duhigg Foundation, Stand Together, and the New Pluralists, while serving as a thought partner to many others. We learned firsthand how valuable Brandon's insights and leaderships are when he stepped up to serve on our board of directors at Essential Partners from 2022 to 2023. He was instrumental in guiding us through a critical strategic planning process, shaping EP's own internal commitments to race and belonging, and inviting us to think bigger and bolder as we grew. Every time I work with Brandon, I'm amazed by how he models our mission in every single thing he does. A brilliant facilitator, preacher, social worker, artist, and polymath, Brandon is being honored tonight for his steadfast, visionary support of Essential Partners and our larger mission: build a world of thriving communities, strengthened by difference, connected by trust. Thank you, Brandon.
Katie, thank you so much. I am ecstatic to be receiving this award. I'm humbled by it. I was just reflecting the other day about my debut into philanthropy nearly 8 years ago, and how 6 out of those 8 years, Essential Partners has been such an amazing partner of mine and the work that I've been trying to do in the world today, bridging divides. And I see Essential Partners as the gold standard for what it looks like to bridge, what it looks like to innovate around collaboration in communities and nationally to solve some of the most wicked and intractable problems that keep us all up at night. So it is Essential Partners that gives me hope. Gives me hope for the future, and I am looking forward to what is next for you all in this upcoming year. We have a lot of work to do, but I am most hopeful because groups like Essential Partners are in the universe of folks doing amazing work. So I humbly accept this award knowing that you, Katie, and John, and all of your team are doing all of the work yourselves to drive all of this impact that we need to see in the world today. So thank you again, and looking forward to the rest of the show.
All right. Tonight's 3 Founders Award recipients, Janelle, Beverly, and Brandon, are just a few bright stars within a galaxy of changemakers and community builders who have trained and partnered with us. They are part of a growing movement of people who see that community belonging and healthy discourse are not luxuries. They are essential.
The dedication of these 3 award recipients serves as a powerful reminder of what it takes to repair our social fabric and foster constructive dialogue.
They also exemplify the hope this work holds for a better future, one where we can navigate differences with dignity and authenticity. Hope is essential, and we are grateful for these 3 award recipients that have given us hope tonight.
And it's worth saying that you can be part of this movement too. By downloading our free resources, attending a workshop, or starting a better kind of conversation in your context, you join us in this mission of connection and community. You bring hope to the people in your life, and we're here to support you every step of the way.
The demand for our work continues to grow, and we need your support to expand our capacity and create access for every person and community.
Tonight, as we celebrate 35 years of impact, our goal is to raise $35,000. Reaching this goal will let us reach people in thousands of communities across the United States. It lets us take on the most sensitive, explosive, complex projects.
Thanks to the generosity of our donors and sponsors, we are close to reaching that goal. I hope you will consider helping us close that gap.
With a generous donation of any size, your gift will equip more community leaders like Janelle and Beverly. It lets us create new free resources about the most divisive issues. It funds scholarships and free coaching with the people who need us most.
As a reminder, you can visit our donation page at whatisessential.org/donate, or you can use your phone to scan the QR code above, or text EP35 to 44321.
Thank you again for your generosity, and thank you for joining us tonight.
And now, to close out our gala, we will hand things off to our co-executive directors, Katie Hyten and John Saruf.
Whether you've known us for 35 years or 35 hours, whether you've worked with us as a partner, a funder, a cheerleader, a facilitator, or an ambassador, we see each and every one of you as an essential partner in this mission.
Because let's face it, the mistrust, the grief, the assumptions, and the fear that divide us are not going to go away on their own. Whether it presents as political polarization, social isolation, or entrenched conflicts, the challenges we face are deep and they are real. But we, here in this gathering, can be sources of hope.
Together, We can build a world of thriving communities, strengthened by difference and connected by trust.
Over the past decade, Essential Partners has more than doubled our scale and our reach. But it will take many more leaders and many more communities to shift how we all navigate differences, engage one another, and have the conversations that matter most.
Each of you is engaged in the work of community already, whether it's through your kids' school, your synagogue, your YMCA classes, your library memberships, or your team at work. Each of those cornerstones of community life offers many opportunities to develop the skills, the relationships, and the framework for healthier discussions, a stronger sense of belonging, and more inclusive decision-making. That's the power of dialogue.
We hope that you'll join us in this mission by making a generous donation right now, by talking about Essential Partners in your community, and by practicing dialogue in your communities, wherever they may be.
Thank you for joining us to celebrate 35 years of healing and belonging, connection and curiosity, hope and democracy. Thank you for being essential partners in this work. Good night.